Hi, this is Jeff Allen, and I wanted to do another one of these videos on kind of, well, it's not just the language industry. I'm going to cover a couple of other points here. But this is going to be an answer to Val on the post that she made on kind of the necessary, the reason to really focus on content management as really an essential thing in an enterprise. And this is really funny because I've been wanting to do a kind of a video on this anyways on the past week. And so this is the right timing to answer that, Val. Um, so what I want to call this is kind of the risk of focusing too much on user interface and user experience instead of underlying data structures and content, okay, and metadata. Um, or we could call this, really, the risk of really overemphasizing the surface level things on the beautiful, interfaces on that, while you're neglecting or sacrificing underlying content, metadata, and all that. And so I'm going to give a few anecdotes or kind of things from experience in different places where I've seen it was done well, and the kind of things that I avoid now, and to kind of give a framework of that. And so this won't be a 2-minute thing, but I'll try to keep it as short as I can, okay? As much as possible. But some of these things I want to give, really, these are all the things that were done, and really show that. So first cite just General Motors, and back in the late 1990s and in the early 2000s at General Motors, there was Kurt Godden and Linda Means that were going around at conferences talking about the General Motors Castle project. So kind of a global English project for authoring guidelines and all that, and then an entire translation workflow with machine translation or automated translation, and automated or machine translation post editing. So it's editing the output of automatic translation. And they were talking about using the SAE, the Society for Automotive Engineering J2450 quality measurement guidelines that has 8 different categories, how they apply that for the automotive uh, quality management, and actually going through and giving feedback on the issues that are coming through the automated translation system by the post editors. And it was really they were talking about a lot of that and how they were doing it. And so it was kind of a big project. And they're going around different conferences talking about it at CLAW, I think of that Localization World, and a bunch of different conferences. And the SAE, Top Tech, multilingual documentation in different places. So that's where they were kind of giving all these different presentations. And it was, it was a pretty big project. And and it involved a lot of underlying things. It wasn't just they weren't talking about the tool so much. They're talking about all the other things that were underneath, like the writing guidelines and how to dealing with the quality measurement with that J2450 and all that. Those are things they were really focusing on, and to explain the challenge. Take another example. Symantec, the antivirus software company, was a Sysran customer, and I was a Sysran for a period of time. And what Sysran had, or Symantec had done, is they had put together, they had also done a controlled authoring, language authoring system or kind of methodology. They had some dedicated experts they hired on as well, who had learned from those of us who are first generation folks or earlier first generation folks. These are kind of the next generation um, folks that had some experience doing the PhDs or masters and PhDs, and that had read everything we had done earlier in the earlier years. Um, and so that included controlled language authoring. It included Sysran was involved in the machine translation or automatic translation part. There was a translation memory integration. Um, and there's a customer testimony right up on the Sysran website about Symantec. So just go there, find it, and see what they say. It's a short one, but I was the one that organized to get them to do this. And to arrange to have them do it, to talk about what they were doing. But they were going around. Fred was of Symantec at the time, was going around and giving various public conference talks at the Sysran User Conference, Localization World, and a bunch of other places. I just look it up, Symantec Fred Holloway, and you'll find all that. He's no longer there, but you'll find all those talks. And then there were other ones around the same time of the late 90s and early 2000s. So there's like Nortel, their ASE, another controlled language thing, Avaya, Scannet Trucks, the whole ACMA, Boeing simplified, and then Boeing doing it with the simplified technical English. Well, ACMA simplified technical English. I know it's called AST or ASD today or something, but um, I don't follow all the names of all the changes these things go through. I can't remember all the recent, latest and greatest name of some of these things. And then the whole simplified technical English checker, which there was a checker and that had been even made available to people, and all the guidelines. It's a huge, just a huge manual, and some specific guidelines you get to follow, uh, and all that. And so those were a few of the examples, and those kind of the ones. And I'll give now the example of Caterpillar just because I was on that project from almost the beginning, and and I had many different roles, so I kind of saw the whole cycle of what happened and how we're doing it. And so I was hired to be the trainer of the controlled language, of the Caterpillar Technical English, which is the second round, because back in the 70s there had been one called Caterpillar Fundamental English. It was a lot more simple, a lot more simplified vocabulary, very simple. And then that was kind of abandoned. And then in the 1990s, early 1990s, there was a focus on the Caterpillar Technical English, and that's where I came in 1995. And so came in to be the trainer of the controlled language, that Caterpillar Technical English, and then the task workflow system, and to be the trainer of all the SGML tags to all the authors and translators, 100, 200 of them on site, and with some vendor translation companies. Um, Terrain over the machine translation post editing, and also I did the daily on-site support for all the different systems I just mentioned. I was the French linguist there as well, and did all the French vocabulary review and a bunch of other tasks. So you can see that I kind of did a lot of the things from training and support and doing it in the trenches, and and all these different integration things, these different parts. But the one with the Caterpillar one was, this is where I want to kind of really focus on that we talked about, is just don't focus on interfaces, and user experience. Focus on the underlying parts, kind of the plumbing, I'll call it, um, because that whole new authoring and translation landscape at Caterpillar was probably the most expensive implementation, if you include all the inflation rates that have come up since the 1990s, than any other project in the world. And these recent claims that in the press releases that the B&B kind of set up as the most expensive, it's no. I mean, Caterpillar one cost way more, way more, and it could have cost 4 times more. So the whole thing on the authoring side, okay? So I just want to show what was done on the tool part, because the technology thing, and this is what all gets all the hype, okay? These tool technologies get all the hype, and that's about what you're saying in your thing. It's not just about technology. And so I want to show this is what was the thing. Here's what underlying. So there was a new content. There's a new kind of task content management and workflow system. Uh, and for authoring and translation, I believe it was IBM that had done that, Caterpillar. And then the new system there was to actually to create the objects for authoring and translation stories and objects on Oracle Forms, if I remember correctly. Then there was a whole new authoring interface, and that was Arbitex. Caterpillar put Arbitex on the map with that license. That was like their first big account for Arbitex, and that's what kind of got them going. Um, and then there's a new controlled language grammar and spell checker customized to 150 different writing rules. Maybe it's more around 170. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but um, and then there was a new terminology entry and review tool known as Terados Multiterm that everybody knows today. That was their early days, and that was just the authoring side. Okay, and they had a whole they have the coordinators creating all the indexes of the manuals with a kind of their ontology. There's a whole of that, but we'll get that in a second here. Then the translation side, there was a whole new automatic translation system that was created by the Center of Machine Translation at Carnegie Mellon University. That was the KANT project. I forgot to mention that the new author, the control language grammar, was done by Carnegie Mellon, which is Carnegie Group, and then Carnegie Mellon University created the translation system. Then we internally also on the translation side built an in-house internal translation memory tool for that system after evaluating all the options that were available at the moment at the time, and then we had been using IBM's TM2 at the time, but just looked at all the options, just wasn't going to work. And then we kind of reused that TM2 tool, the translation memory in-house one, to do author memory tasks as well. Um, but the costs, um, the whole implemented system for that Caterpillar new authoring environment and translation environment ended up only costing 25% or 1/4 of what the original proposed solution was going to cost. And why was that? Because it already cost too much. And so, from what I remember, and really was decided to not do this kind of automatic everything could do everything and just do a stop and go authoring system where each of the authors had to use some advanced linguistic knowledge to be able and grammar skills to be able to attach specific when they're going through the grammar checker. It would say, okay, this preposition, what is attached to? Is it attached to this verb or this noun? And does this adjective does it attach to this noun or what? And uh, and so it really required. And that was the stop and go system. The original goal was to have something that could actually just do this automatically, but that was way too expensive. I don't want to. I don't even want to mention the numbers here. Um, so there were change management results, okay, and a lot of the new tools for the authors, we had to put it in context. Those authors 6 years before had been still writing on paper, and that this there were secretaries that were typing the written handwritten version onto a computer, or maybe even you know, but that's what I remember from the pilot user. He said, "Oh yeah, just 6 years ago we were still writing out things by hand, and 6 years later they have to type it, and none of these folks didn't know how to type, so they were two-finger typing. Um, and so there was that kind of change management challenge. A lot of the population, most of the population did not have actually degrees in technical writing or language or anything. Most of them had just come up through the shop and learned the terminology. And the next promotion was, hey, a job in technical writing. So a lot of the folks did not even have the linguistic skills. So that was going to be another challenge. And then I had to actually create custom grammar courses because we had the plans to do the controlled language um, training for a week. But on top of that, way before that, 6 months ahead of time, I just said we got to train these people in grammar because we got to start there. So I could only convince the management to let me give an additional kind of training session of 3 times 1 hour, 3 different spots, and did that several times, uh, including the grammar test taken in class at the beginning and the end of those 3 hours of 3 separate hours. So all the testing had to be done in class too. Couldn't do it. I mean, this is like a semester course, folks. This is a semester course, and I had to condense everything I could find on everything down to 3 separate hours, including the tests. That was a big challenge. And thank you for Grammar Rock, Saturday morning commercials. That helps a lot too, and that really did help. Um, all the things I grew up with when I was a kid. So the thing here was that there was a very high learning curve, and there was a very heavy training and support team on site for years to be able to support this. This cost us much more. There was a whole team of actually early trained authors who had not been dealt with the legacy content baggage and the rules and things they had learned for 30 years. They just came in and just took all the legacy stuff and started rewriting it into stories, and then those would be used as boiler templates and boilerplate stories for the other authors to use. And we had to completely adapt. I had to completely adapt those 150 writing rules, control language writing into a much more simplified set of 20 meta rules. That's 20 was way too much at that, but that's all I could get it down to just make it easier to understand. Um, and so all this is kind of the technology layer right there, and the dealing with it, kind of what it is, what it was as a technology kind of system. But and this comes down to this question here, Val, and I wanted to really come to this because this is where it's really I want to. That's what I'm emphasizes that it wasn't just about the technology. It was also, there was a heavy investment in the underlying formats and the underlying content and the metadata. There was an intentional focus on that. And what did Caterpillar do? I mean, this is what cost so much. Was they put in a whole new ontological approach for the content coordinators. So chapters and indexing for 17 product lines, just all that was kind of reworked and reworked with those tools I mentioned and all that. Then it took 5 years to have a team of two people actually working on the entire SGML DTD uh, to be used for kind of data tagging approach. Um, and then and then those would be the tags, and we'd have to teach the train the authors. There was a notebook of just that part, just the HTML tags, a whole notebook just on that, and a notebook on the writing guidelines, 150, and there were this was just like massive, intensive. The training week was like hard for the folks. Then there was optimized semantic tagging underneath that could flip the nouns and the verbs and the adjectives around in the translation target languages based on the concepts like trademark, product name, and all that. So it would do the flipping of the words based on what the categories were. So all this underlying, this is semantics. So this was actually worked on and was well done, really well done. And then the big thing that had been done is there's been a total corporate vocabulary database cleansing for 1 year. Okay. 1 million entries down to 50,000 in the first year by one person who worked in a lot of different departments. Then there was a progressive increase of all those additional adding on to this 50,000 to make it to 70,000 in 2 years. And those are all reviewed in the source language English and all the target languages because everybody was there in the same floor. And so there was, it was all reviewed and everything. And I participated in those. And then the slow increase. And I heard several years later they got up to about 77,000. So went to 50 to 70, 77,000. Okay. Um, but there was a cleansing, just a purge. And they started with that. And what I want to say with this specific, with this one, Caterpillar, but the other ones too, and what I'd seen and talked to people, we networked at conference, talked a little bit more what they were doing. I went and gave a talk at General Motors one time too, and they didn't just paint the house and make it look new, okay, and cool with a few new features, and it wasn't just that. It wasn't just like putting lipstick on the piggy, okay, if you want to say it that way. They replaced all of the household appliances within the house, and they redid all the electricity wiring and all the plumbing. Okay, that's the equivalent was. It was, and then had to deal with all the training of how to use all the appliances and to support if the people couldn't didn't do it. We were all about knowing how to push that button or actually do this thing or do that. They had to have support people that are actually helping the people in the house. Okay, so it's like you got your electricians around all the time showing you how to flip the light switches because you got these early kind of funky light switches and stuff, or they're all these touch buttons. They're not just a flip a switch anymore. You got this other way to do it. So so those are kind of what I saw, from the experience there, that there was a serious, really a very serious implementation. These ones, when they do this, it's not just about putting in place some really cool technologies. It's really going through and doing, like I said, cabinet cleanup, especially in the cases of acquisitions. Mergers and acquisitions are just killers for this kind of thing. But the Caterpillar one, it wasn't that case. But when you see in other ones, telecom industry, they get, there's lots of acquisitions. So you get this, who's going to win out on the whole, we're going to keep our term thing. And then the whole ontology and taxonomy kind of reworking for all this interoperability of all the objects in the system. They could be stories, titles, warnings, notices, whatever. And that's just technical kind of user documentation or some service specs or whatever. I mean, you can think about all these different types of content that would have different categories and classification, all that. And then heavy training and support infrastructure to make all this take place. Like I said, you got the electricians and the plumbers around helping you for a couple of years, showing how to flush the toilet and all this kind of stuff. Because it's a really complex toilet, a really complex light fixtures or whatever. Um, so those are those ones. That's just from that. Now I'm gonna give a couple of examples from another industry or two that I worked in, and where again data structure and data management is super important, not just the cool tool. Okay, and so one of its business intelligence. I work here at SAP Business Objects site where I've been for 13 years, and this is this is where the business intelligence was invented. Business intelligence was invented with all the patents, and so kind of when the first forerunners in that area. And Crystal Reports was actually one of the acquisitions. I mean, this kind of the place for all these business intelligence BI reporting tools. And yeah, there are different types of BI reporting software for different audiences. You can have a KPI driven executive management reporting tool, and then you can have another ones for operational reporting, for task reporting, different teams showing the life cycle of objects. This task went through this, got to a got to a feature, and then I got a bug report, and I got fixed, and you can report on all this kind of stuff and bugs and all that, and all the task reporting and the test software test plans and all that. And you can do audit trail analysis and all that. Those are all kinds of technologies. But underneath those kinds of systems, um, there are always a focus on all these business intelligence and other ones. There's always a focus on having database connectors for every type of database, a data warehouse, or whatever you want to call these things. There are. You got to have the connectors so you can pull data from all these different data sources, and you pull it. Okay, great. But then what do you do with it? And then you have intermediate layers of um, sometimes called semantic layers, or sometimes called intermediate transformation, or something data transformation, or it's coming to classification of data. So you can then reuse it and put it in a format that's reusable, and then you can output it and put it in these different types of reports of these different reporting tools for the different audiences. Um, the whole area of business intelligence and sometimes you can call this enterprise performance management for one of the things. Other ones are kind of decision support tools. I mean, there are all these different tools I've kind of worked on that it all comes down to that. You gotta have all these connectors, uh, different databases or databases, or what do you want to call the data warehouses or data marts or whatever, and then be able to deal with the data, and then get it and make sure that you deal with because if you don't get good data, hey, it just shows up and bam, you got it in your face. Um, so another one I worked on is performance management software for a wireless telecom software at Mycom, and for network optimization. Kind of basically all the rerouting all your SMS messages during Christmas, and make sure there aren't going to be traffic jams at the wrong time. So your SMS messages, happy, Merry Christmas or Happy New Year, that just not all the messages aren't all stuck in the system somewhere. They're being rerouted and all that. But it's not just about cool software, and we had pretty cool software. It's a lot easier to use than SQL and commands and all that. It was a lot easier to use, more object you could just drag and drop and do it, and this kind of thing. So it really made it was easier for the engineers to use, and I trained all those folks, all those engineers in several companies. Uh, but underneath was all the big data format transformations and all the content classification and all the 3GPP kind of specifications for all the data formats. I mean, this is big data, telecom stuff. This is all your wireless. This is all your phone. So in every country. So and then network data handshake analysis and data monitoring, all this. This is just like um, this is how it functions, and it's always focusing on the underlying infrastructure and the data and the metadata and the content, and how to make sure how that's going to surface, uh, so that on your phone you don't get a call drop. You get the call keeps going. You keep going. It's happening, and you're not going to be dropped, and you hopefully won't be dropped in the forest, or in a train or something. But that's all kind of network, availability and all that, and knowing where to identify your phone and all this stuff, and all the handshake between the phone method, between the phone actually taking the call, and the handshake between them. And all this is data, just data back and forth. So these are when I come back to the language industry and I say, where are we at in the language industry? And when I say language industry, kind of all the user buyers of language tools, content management systems, and all these whatever spell checkers and whatever and translation tools and and in visual concepts and image image mapping and all that and whatever you want to call it, all these different things that are all kind of just they're trying to communicate something in some kind of language, spoken or text or visual. Um, the things that I really think about, um, and I'll share here, kind of finishing up, or why I think this is important. This not just not always focusing on the technology, but really focusing on the underlying things. Um, the red flags for me in any project, that when a new project's kind of being mentioned somewhere, um, and I see a lot of these in press releases too. So I mean, it's just when I see something, whenever I see something, okay, immediate red flags for me are if I see the words automation, 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 just all the time, but there's no mention of anything about human computer interaction, HCI, or there's nothing about machine assisted or machine aided processes, or nothing about human assisted automation. If it doesn't mention that kind of human and computer or machine type of working together collaboratively, that kind of makes it smell bad. Um, and if there's no mention of like learning curve strategies and skills of the users and styles of the users, that smells bad. Those are red flags for me. If I also hear only about KPIs, mention about KPIs, and cost cutting, that doesn't smell very good either. And if I see nothing about any kind of recognition of psychological stress and change management and transformation management and all the transformation process management, all those things for the users and how the users are going to kind of be cognitively effective by this, that doesn't sound good. Um, And if there's also, thirdly, another set of red flags for me is if there's kind of a focus always on centralized databases in kind of very large corporations, that's going to be no mention of like federated databases and all that kind of stuff, then that's going to be an obvious candidate for like performance problems. And then the users are going to be struggling. They're going to be sitting there, getting going cups of coffee all the time. So those kind of the red flags I think about, and the other things just the things that I will no longer even touch projects that if they don't include kind of these things as primary focal points, um, is anything about taxonomy. If it doesn't mention anything about taxonomy, ontology, repurposing, and mapping, that's a big just don't go there because it's going to be a problem. Um, if there's no domain overlapping, mention of domain overlapping and all that, subdomain, domain, and anything like that, kind of go with the taxonomy stuff. That's done. If there's no mention like or classification, simplification of the taxonomies, or whatever you want to call these things. If there's no mention like vocabulary database reduction, I just don't don't want to go there. And and that can also be vocabulary like content cleanup, because if you don't clean it up, then the data that you've got in the legacy systems are going to come through exactly as it was in the system, which it may have been kind of like done in a certain way, and the data's going to come out. It's going to show. It's going to have all kinds of bugs because the target system is not going to display it in the same way that the legacy system did, and the users are going to start putting bug reports in all the time where it's not the issue of the target system, it's the issue of the data transfer between the legacy system and that the formatting it wasn't handled by the API or whatever it might do. And so the users are going to start, it's going to just create a lot of bug reports. And that's going to support just costly. And so if you don't fix that up front in the data cleanup and the data, complete review and all that, then you're gonna get just bombarded, and it's gonna cost way more than expected. Like I said, it's several years of people on the training support doing that, and even that had been well planned. If there's nothing, another thing I don't want to touch is anything about it doesn't have like a mention of content reduction and reuse strategies. It doesn't mention that, then no way, I don't want to touch it. If there is no mention of like upcoming performance problems and likely problems, then that's a red. I just don't want to get involved. Um, if there's no mention of in-depth testing of new features and making sure that you've got a, really you've got unit testing, you've got integration testing, you've got cross-system and performance testing, you get the full line of kind of testing, then oh boy, I just that's going to just be a catastrophe, a potential disaster. Um, no mention of like data management across different systems. Again, it comes back to things I already mentioned, and no ways to like track the content and data changes and know that, and if no way to know how many users have actually been using certain features and stuff, then you just have no idea of what's being handled. Um, and this is just a short list. I mean, this is just I just want to give a thing, and I've been going for 30 minutes here. I mean, this is I don't want to go on longer, but these are the things why I really agree with you, Val, that it's not about technology only. It really is about the underlying content and the data structures and the how you're going to handle all that interoperability of the data, whatever type of data it may be. It can be content, main data, or it can be in written form strings or paragraphs or string menu strings or whatever, or it could be term entries or whatever these things are, and how they're going to get appear in another display in another system. Because once you put this out, you put a cool new looking feature, this new interface out, all the UI, it's been UX, tested and designed and stuff. Cool looking thing. It's better user experience, but then it comes crap that comes through. The crap starts going to cut through because it hasn't been it's polluted with stuff. All these different formatting from the legacy something. It's gonna give the users a worse experience. You might as well not have given them the experience of that. It's not about the cool, sexy looking app. People want to get their task done, and we're living in a world where it's all faster. It's got to be faster. So, and I'm a video here. It's not fast enough. But I think these are kind of the takeaways to really think about what you're doing when you put a new project in place, and consider all those things, and don't underestimate it because it will cost you in the end if you don't do it. It'll cost you not only in support and in additional training, but it'll cost you reputation too. That you put into place kind of a crap system for the users, and then the performance is down. The data looks bad. You get support people having to do the fixes. You're causing more development fixes. You got to hire more people to do the development fixing and all the fixes and the bug fixes and all that stuff. It's going to cost you more in the end. So do it right. That's my recommendation, folks. And it doesn't have to be like this huge. You have to boil the ocean. You can do a lot of bootstrapping and things, and do things that are easy. I've done a lot of that too. So it's not that it's always hard. You just have to make sure that you think about it, um, and think about scaling it. Start small, scale it, but do it right from the beginning. And so hopefully there's a few points that will kind of help and give some knowledge of how it can be done better. And I really do agree with you, Val, what you're saying about the whole technology